Sure.
I usually say the number one mistake that people make when they reach out to agents is you just have to remember that agents are really, really busy, just like everyone else. And
Yep.
if you send them
Yep.
a book to read, over email, and they're in the gauntlet zone of like grinding and like a long day or on a conference call, you just have to think about it from their perspective.
Hmm.
You may not have any interest from like a record label or a manager yet, but maybe you're drawing tickets,
Yeah.
right? That's where I would say just
Yep.
reach out to them. Yes, like a lot of them won't respond, of course, but like some of the best emails I've ever seen have been like, "Hey Daniel, I love your roster. We sound a lot like Grandson. Uh, we just sold out our hometown. Here's our upcoming demo that's not released yet." I don't really need to know that
Yep.
much more from the jump.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Third edition is out now everywhere, all formats, audio, physical, hardcover, ebook, however you do the book thing, you can find it. Today, my guest is Daniel McCartney. He is a booking agent at UTA. His artists include Grandson and Mothika, who is also on the show, Mod Son, many others. He's also the founder of Outlast Records, which is a record label, an imprint of Sumerian Records. And he's also the co-founder of the Continuance Foundation, which is their tagline is, well, they say they're provide community resources, counseling, coaching, and education for musicians and the music industry to improve their mental health. And that's what we kind of got started discussing for a little bit today. Mental health is so crucial and important in the industry, and I don't think we talk about it enough. So I'm always looking for people that are specializing in this, that are focusing on it, that are providing resources to the industry at large. And I think that's really important and really crucial. And so I really appreciate what Daniel has been doing with the foundation. And we talk all about the resources that they provide and how you can get access to them. It was a great conversation. And then we also spent quite a bit of time on the state of the live music industry, the touring industry right now. We talk a lot about support tours and how to get on them, the ranges of what people are paying for support tours from all level, from clubs all the way up to arenas, how to make money on the road. Daniel breaks down a lot of different ways that artists are making money and the difference between a losing tour and a winning tour. He talks all about that. He talks about, what to do to make sure that your tours are profitable. And he gives some really great practical advice. And we even talk about, how to break out of your hometown, because Daniel, what's so cool is he started as a musician. And this is something that I really appreciate, his musician's empathy and kind of where he came from as the guitarist. He actually started as the guitarist of the metalcore band Gideon. So many of you are probably familiar with Gideon. So he started as the guitarist of that band. And now he is an industry executive. And a lot of the stuff that we discussed, we put in the show notes. So a lot of the links to the resources and all of that. So check that out. You can find Daniel McCartney and UTA and the Continuance Foundation on all the socials. He said they're very active, the Continuance Foundation, on their social media. So definitely check them out. Their Instagram, and Outlast Records, and they're very active as well on their social media. So check them out on the socials. You can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on Instagram and TikTok. We are on Threads and Twitter as well. I'm not really sure what's happening with Threads and Twitter these days. So, you can find us there too, but we're most active on Instagram and TikTok. You can find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram, and visit aristake.com and get on the email list. That's where you're going to find the most up-to-date relevant info that we send out there. But real quick, if you just pause this, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. That would really helps. If you want the show to follow, pop up in your feed, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button, and we'll show up there. And leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or however you're listening to this. If it's on YouTube, click that thumbs up, leave us a comment. I love reading those. And stay in touch. All right, let's kick into the show. Daniel McCartney, welcome to the show.
Man, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Course. So I'm excited to talk to you today. You wear many different hats in the industry, and I love that you started as an artist. If I got this right, you're the guitarist in the metalcore group Gideon. It's
Mhm.
kind of to have that artist empathy and that artist perspective. I think is so crucial and missing from a lot of industry people oftentimes, and like to have that empathy I think is really important. Um, but also, as kind of a label founder, and of course, as the booking agent at UTA, a massive booking agency, repping some great clients. But I do want to start off today by talking about something that I believe you started just a couple years ago, and I'd love to hear the journey in starting the Continuance Foundation and kind of your focus on mental health, because I think it is something so needed in the industry, and it's for some reason the music industry seems that we struggle with mental health more than most other industries. At least that's my perception. Um, Top to bottom, left to right, from the highest level executives down to the artists, and we often hear about the high profile artists that have canceled tours, and they get a lot of the press because they're names that we know of, and a lot. Of course, Justin Bieber was like famously discussed having to cancel his tours, and but artists of all levels have mentioned that. But what gets reported far less, I think, is the industry executives, and everyone that works in the industry. And for some reason our industry struggles with this so much. So I'm really glad to hear that you have been focusing on this, and I'd love to hear your perspective on kind of how you came to this, and what you're working on.
Yeah, man. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I always say like anyone that has the subject of mental health, close to their heart, um, you kind of, I think that you kind of get into a zone where once you're feeling better, and you're in a bit of a routine in the way that you're dealing with your mental health. You typically want
Hmm.
to you typically want to talk about it, right? And so these platforms are so 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 important. The podcasting, the Instagram lives, like all this stuff. It might seem easy, but it's just so impactful. So thank you. And yeah, look, being an
Yeah.
artist, it still is probably my biggest pitch when I'm in a room trying to sign a client. Is that I was able to, I toured full time and put out 4 records, and toured internationally, domestically, and dealt with record labels and publishers and all this stuff. And it's been really good experience. I think like, a lot of artists would just want their team to not be robotic. And I think that I was able to
Hmm.
kind of like bypass coming off of coming off as someone that is robotic, or like a no, I mean, honestly, man, like there are a lot of agents that they're not going to do anything above what they're required, and that's totally okay as long as they're getting their job done. However, I'm a little different. I'm a little bit more hands on. That comes from me kind of having a little bit more knowledge in some of the other spaces that aren't even necessarily the agents um,
Hmm.
what the agent's supposed to be doing, or the agent's responsibility. Um, so that's been great. Yeah, and I did found. I'm the founder of a record label called Outlast Records, which is under Sumerian Music
Hmm.
Group. That's a bit of a passion
Hmm.
project, and I've got some really cool developmental acts on that, and then very all things mental health. I speak at conferences. I do all the, I do the Instagrams series. We do podcasting. We do all this different stuff, and all of it really comes down to the goal of helping people and advocating for the mental health subject, and also
Hmm.
trying to connect people to get them in with professionals if they need it, and if they just need support.
Yeah.
We're very very active on social networks. So it's been fun, man. I mean, look, I basically made this foundation as something that I kind of wish that I would have had when I was a musician, and that's why it's almost been. when people ask me, how did you start it? I'm like, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Just being honest, I just kind of
Yeah.
jumped right in as someone who's like, all right, well, I know what my needs were, and let's start
Yeah.
there. You know what I mean? And we were
Yeah.
able to kind of blossom it into a cool thing and do a lot of great work. So, I've
Yeah.
it's been a
That's
long journey, a fun one.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear, and it's nice to hear your story and the journey. However you want to take this, but specifically, I'd like to know if there are musicians or even industry executives or anyone working in the industry out there who are kind of interested in seeking out more resources or in need of more resources, whether that be mental health professionals, therapists, or anyone potentially even more serious. You mentioned that you provide some resources or anything like that, but even outside, theoretically the Continuance Foundation network. What do you recommend? Like, if there are people listening right now, they're like, I just don't know where to turn. I'm not really sure what to do, and maybe I can't afford a therapist or something because it'd be expensive. Like, what are the first steps, and kind of like what do you offer? Where do you or how do you point people? Where do you point them?
Well, look, I think it's a great question, and the first thing I would say is, reach out for help, right? Like it's a simple thing, but also when I think us as people, we're kind of designed to be that if we can't handle something for ourselves, excuse me, if we can't handle something for ourselves, we
Hmm.
think, oh well, I just don't know how to do this or whatever. But you got to remember that there are so many people that care about this subject and have the resources that they can plug you in
Yeah.
with, right? So even if it's down to like referrals or like, obviously, therapy is, I live and die by it. I love it. I go once a week. It saved my
Hmm.
life for sure. Not everyone can afford therapy. It's not that simple sometimes. Some health
Yeah.
insurance providers don't cover therapy. However, there's a
Yeah.
ton of great organizations that will refer you. You got Backline, you've got Continuance, you got Music
Mhm.
Cares. There's a lot of really, really good organizations that they may not be able to just write a check for your therapy, but they might be able to get, for example, Continuance Foundation, we have a partnership with BetterHelp. So no matter
Mhm.
what, we can get them plugged in with a certain amount months free of therapy. We can't always just be
Can
like,
you explain what
give
BetterHelp
them.
is?
Yeah, BetterHelp is a network that it's kind of like, I don't know if you personally have ever gone through the process of like going into your health insurance provider and like going into the portal and looking for a therapist. It's really daunting,
Mhm.
and it's like
Yeah.
it's just it's there's nothing easy about it, and you literally just don't know what you're doing. You might as well just pick a name off of a list. BetterHelp is a more of a
Yeah.
platform that connects you. It's really really user friendly, um, and it's just a way more attainable platform and app. So
Mhm.
we partner with them, and we're able to immediately get people into free therapy from the jump. And obviously, we vet the therapists, and we know that they're fully capable of
Wow.
doing their job. And yeah, so you just
Yeah.
kind of never know how someone's going to be able to help,
Great.
and you got to ask when you're
Yeah.
in need, because literally there's not a single person on this
Mm.
planet that hasn't gone through something or, had their own shit and needed someone else to help them. Right. So I think that that's a big part of it.
Yes. Absolutely, and that's, you mentioned Backline, which, we had Hillary Gleason from Backline on the show, last year, and in Music Cares, we've partnered with them in the past, and they're a great organization that if people don't know about Music Cares, it's from, the Recording Academy. It's kind of an organization within the Recording Academy that um, provides financial assistance to musicians in need. And it can be anything from medical bills. If there are medical bills, you can apply. And I've heard of people that, got into serious trouble and did not have health insurance and had tens of thousands of dollars of medical bills that Music Cares covered. or anything. I mean, honestly, they're just there to help, which financially, which is a great resource, and I'm glad you brought them up. And then similarly, Backline sounds very similar to what you're doing in kind of providing resources in terms of like therapists or well, vetted therapists, which I think is really important. And then you mentioned that you've partnered with BetterHelp and also to help provide free or discounted therapy. How do you go about that? Do you have grants, or do you have people that are kind of funding this, or are they donating their time, or how does this work?
Well, luckily, BetterHelp is a company that prioritize. They really are prioritizing, I think, giving quality therapy. So they just believe in our mission. And so most of the time what will happen is we'll get, from the jump, you can usually get at least 3 months for free for the musician.
Hmm.
Um, the thing
Great.
is not everyone wants to go to therapy permanently. I'm a permanent
Yeah.
therapy guy. Like I'll probably
Sure.
have a therapist until the day I die. It works for me. Not everyone
Yeah.
needs it that way though. So like 3 months is a good
Mm.
time, I think, too, if you're grieving or you're going through something specific. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's a good kind of time period of, you get, let's say you do 4 sessions a month, 12 sessions to really kind of dig deep. And if they need more, usually we can accommodate. So that's been a really,
Yeah.
I mean, that's been a really great resource for us to have. It's just been
Cool.
so, it's also very, very swift because we literally just give them a
Yeah.
code that we have. And, if you're
Awesome.
in a bad spot and you're asking for a therapist, usually any type of effort that is required is kind of brutal. You know what I mean? It's kind of one of those
Yeah.
things where
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're not really in a spot to take on a bunch of to-do lists to be able to get that. So for us to be able to do it quickly and swiftly
Yeah.
is a big part of it too.
That's awesome. Well, that's great. And for those that are kind of interested in taking advantage of some of what you discussed, would it be just kind of how do they go about this? How do they find you? How do they sign up for this?
Well, we're really good on our social networks. Our Instagram is continue always. And we also have a submission form on our
Okay.
website. So both of them, we have a small operation. So both of them go to like 3 people that will definitely actually read it and
Hmm.
definitely respond. So, um, and then
Cool.
like I said, like just by following our social networks alone, there's so much great content. We do mindfulness Mondays. We do a conversations about mental health series. I'm always doing podcasts. We post all the
Hmm.
reels from there. If I ever speak at an event, it'll be on the, the
Yeah.
information will be on there. And we really just try to like
Cool.
actually engage with the people who are following it.
Great. Cool. And we'll put links to all of that, what you discussed in the show notes so people can find it. Um,
Sick.
Awesome. I also want to talk about kind of your role as a booking agent. You've been a booking agent. How long have you been booking agent at UTA?
So I started at UTA 8 years ago. And I think about
Wow.
3 of those years I was an assistant and then got
Hmm.
promoted. Had about, you know, 2 years of um, starting to build my roster, and then the pandemic happened and kind of threw it all for a whirl. But yeah, I've been at the company for 8 years.
Okay. Awesome. And I read somewhere you're booking artists like Grandson, Mathika, who was also on the podcast. And Modson. Now, I'm curious about when you. I guess I'd love to kind of talk about the state of touring, where we're at right now. We are
Sure.
talking August 2023. Um, a lot has shifted, a lot has changed. But if you could kind of point out some of the biggest changes, I would say maybe since COVID, or maybe everything's back to normal. So I don't want to kind of guide you in any one direction, but I'm curious what your perception is of the state of the live music industry is right now.
Yeah, so It's a great question. So it's funny because like right when we touring came back after the pandemic, it was kind of a honeymoon phase,
Yeah.
right? It was like it was almost
Okay.
unrealistic. Like everything was just crushing. Like shows, we put a show on sale and it would just sell
Yep.
out like this. Tours were absolutely crushing, and that's
Yep.
because it was everyone was pent up for years, and it made total sense from
Yes.
like a psychological aspect. It made total sense. Um, and then it kind of got pounded into the ground, and it was a little too much, right?
Yep.
And then tours were terrible for like 4 or 5 months. It was the touring economy was in a really bad spot. A lot of stuff wasn't selling.
Mm,
Festivals were being pulled down. Now I think we're at a spot where it's
right.
evened out, and I even think that this is probably one of the biggest years for touring in a long time. I mean, Drake and Taylor Swift obviously out
Nice.
right now is, I mean, it's literally boosting our economy. So
Right. Right.
I think
Yep.
I think I think now we're in a really good spot. There's some changes. I think we're more equipped to deal with. Hopefully we don't ever have to deal with it again. But we're more equipped to deal with something like a
Yeah.
pandemic. Where I think the music industry has learned a lot from even talk about some of the things that can really affect touring as a pandemic,
Hmm.
weather in some capacities, terrorism is obviously with like the Ariana Grande bombing, and we've
Sure.
seen it and obviously in other live events, obviously with Eagles of Death Metal in Paris. And I
Right.
think when these things happen, I feel like the music industry is doing their best to really bounce back from it. I mean, the security is up
Hmm.
from a lot of those incidents. Obviously, clear bag policies are really really important in arenas and stadiums. So, look, I think I'm. It's been a long ride, but I'm grateful to now kind of be in a consistent spot. It's just funny.
Yeah.
My boss was like, "This is like the first time in your career that you've been operating as an agent in not like extreme circumstances." And I was like,
Oh
that's so crazy to
God.
think about. It's been like a
Yeah.
pandemic, and then
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, dude, it's been wild. But yeah, man, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's talk. I want to get in the weeds a little bit more. We had Tom Windish on the show not too long ago, who of course is Billie Eilish's agent and very high up at Wasserman and has been in the industry for decades. And he spoke kind of more on that higher level. He books arenas and stadiums and stuff. He also books some clubs, but this was still like 6 months ago, and I'm curious from your perspective, working primarily with if I'm not mistaken, kind of club level touring artists. What are you seeing in terms of guarantees versus ticket splits versus merch cuts? Where's the revenue coming from right now? And has it is it like, as you said, normal times? Is it normal? Are you seeing that kind of just we're people are attending shows at the normal levels? And step me through kind of all of that and how it's operating kind of on this mid level.
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, most of my business is, clubs, theaters, and ballrooms. So, anywhere from 500 caps all the way up
Okay.
to 5,000. That's kind of my niche, right? And
Cool.
I mean,
Yep.
the main source of income is coming from the box office, right? And selling tickets. So if you're selling tickets, if you're doing 80 to 100% business in the rooms. So if it's 1,000 cap and you're doing at least 800 people to 1,000 people, most of the time everyone's making money in some capacity. The box office definitely drives it. The promoter
Hmm.
is able to, we always like make jokes about this because, look, I mean, it's you know it's been hard for promoters to be able to keep their head above water post pre and post pandemic. A lot of them didn't. A lot of
Yeah.
them had to sell, and that's just what our timing. That's you know, the unfortunately the cards that a lot of them were dealt. However, I think the venues and the promoters and the agents and the artists are all figuring out a lot of ways to make money. And VIP ticketing is really big, obviously, for meet and greets and upscale
Mm,
experiences. Um, a lot of bands, the really really smart ones, they will make an absolute career out of their merchandise, both online and physical. I mean, I know artists
yes.
who, they'll literally break even on the guarantees, and then the merch is what sends them into like multi six figure net profit. So I think it's
Wow.
kind of every artist is different, but I think the core of it is driven by box office, and then the smart ones know how to build out the other
Mm.
parts of their business. Like I said, VIP ticketing and merchandise and stuff like that.
I love that you mentioned that, and I think it's so important. I think a lot of artists, managers, even agents obsess over the guarantees and what they're going to be making from attendance in the door and all of that at every level. So as an agent who doesn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't participate in merch sales, or do you participate in VIP packages?
We don't participate in merch. The VIP is a difficult question to answer because every situation is kind of different. Some VIP
Okay.
situations, require a ton of bandwidth from the agent based on what company they're using, or if the
Yeah.
artist is doing, if the artist wants to keep all of the revenue from a VIP company standpoint instead of giving,
Yeah.
whatever VIP company their 20 or 25% or whatever they negotiate. Um, it depends.
Yeah.
I would say more often than not, I don't commission the VIP stuff, but
Okay.
I have, because again, it depends on how much bandwidth it requires from me.
Sure. Now that makes sense. Who are some, if there are some, and I guess when do VIP companies and programs and packages come into play? You said you book rooms ranging from 500 to 5,000. Do you encourage your artists at every level to work a VIP program, or are you only focusing on the ones that are kind of at that upper echelon?
The short answer is I encourage everyone to do it because it can make you can go from you know negative whatever on your budget to like walking away with a bunch of money just from doing it.
Sure.
And it
Yeah.
can really really help you build a real career financially. The only sense
Sure.
usually when I would steer away from it would be, this is a very specific example, but like, you know, if you're a really, really cool artist that like your fans are rooted in, maybe like, I'll just use Pigeons and Planes, for example, right? Obviously, it's such a
Hmm.
cool media outlet, news outlet, and brand. You know, it's not going to be advantageous for every artist in the world to do VIP meet and greets because it may not be cool to their fans that they're doing the meet and greets, and
Mm,
they might get almost like some backlash. And
yeah.
I think, which I think is, I think it's kind of silly. But
Yeah.
if you want to pay to meet your, idol or one of your favorite artists, I think the artist should get paid for doing that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it really depends. Um, yeah, but I
Yeah.
think like, I would encourage from the club level all the way up. I mean, once you get into arenas and stuff, it's kind of hard to pull off. Um,
Yeah.
but not every artist wants to do it at that point. But I think
Yeah.
clubs all the way up to ballroom, usually I'm encouraging it.
Yeah, I encourage it too. And I wrote a piece for Variety a few months back when Matty Healy of the 1975 shit on VIP programs, and
Yeah.
I thought that was a very entitled position. They are touring arenas and they're extremely successful and extremely wealthy, and come from privilege, and come from wealth. So I've talked to a ton of indie touring bands, and like you just said today, it can be the difference of a make or break financial tour. It can put you in the red or put you in the black. With a program, you're profitable. Without a program, you lose money and can't tour. And I think there's a way to do it that is respectful. And I've seen in that, not just respectful, but in a way that it's not just like pay to meet your artists, but artists that I've seen, especially at the club level, do it really well. It's like, you invite them to sound check, and you have first access to merch, and you get, in early, and you get like a souvenir lanyard, and you do a Q&A, and you have a special acoustic performance, and like that absolutely to me seems completely worth it, and doesn't seem like a money grab, and it doesn't seem like you're paying to meet them. It seems like you're paying artists for their time, and you actually get like another performance, and other kind of special features and special packages based on that. And so, I think if there's hesitation from any artist or manager listening to this, it's like I think go for it, and just do it in a way that makes sense for you and your fans. And don't call it a meet and greet. Just call it something that's interesting.
Yeah.
Call it a VIP package or whatever. But I think there's definitely a way to do it that makes sense.
Yeah, look, dude. I mean, I'm a big 1975
Yeah,
fan, and I think Matt is obviously brilliant. But
me too.
yeah, dude, it's super easy to say it. It's easy to say at that level, right? I think it's all about
Right.
how the artist really takes the bull by the horns. Because look, if I were a fan and I walked in and I bought this extremely
Yeah.
expensive meet and greet, and someone walked up to me, the singer said hi, shakes my hand, and then just pushes me, and I got 6 seconds of his time. Yeah, sure. That's when
Right.
it's ridiculous, and
Yes.
that's when it's that is taking advantage of your fans. But look,
Yes.
if you're a fan and you get to do the experience where you skip the line, you get a specific T-shirt that you can't even buy anywhere else. You get to watch them sound check. You get a photo with them. Like that's some of these people. These are
Yeah.
like once in a lifetime experiences for them. And yeah, I have no problem with my clients
100%.
charging a premium for that. I just, I think it's great.
Yeah. 100%. No, I love that, and it's nice to hear that reinforced. And similarly, I'm a huge 1975 fan, and I got so much backlash. I did not realize that their fan base was as hardcore as like the Swifties are, because man, did they pile on me on
Oh yeah,
Twitter after that article came out. And I was like, guys, I have nothing bad to say about the music, and honestly, like everything else Maddie does is like, I think is real interesting, and he's a brilliant artist. But yes, it's I think when we're talking club level touring artists that are trying to survive on the road, I think that VIP needs to be part of the conversation.
yeah,
um
100%, man,
so
100%.
yeah. Cool. So moving on, I want to talk kind of support tours right now for a little bit. And you know I find some of the best ways for artists to gain new fans, especially ones that are amazing live, of course, is to be a support act on a tour and kind of win the headliners' fans over. Um, how do you approach? I would say, on one end, getting your artists as support acts on tours, and then on the flip side, um, for your headlining artists, what's the process of kind of getting the support acts for those tours as well?
Well, the industry standard is that you book the tour and then you send out an email, going to all the different companies saying, "Hey, we're seeking support. Ideally someone worth 500 tickets. Here's our budget. So no, please submit. We're looking to bring this type of genre act or whatever." It's not always that simple, but that's kind of like the standard,
Hmm.
I think, for it. And then obviously there are a lot of
Sure.
teams that they don't even send those emails. They keep it within their camps because they already know who they're going to take or whatever. Getting support tours is
Hmm.
is a it's a grind, dude. I mean, I always say once you become a headliner, never look back. When I was trying to kind
Yeah.
of develop Grandson into I mean, we just finished up a tour for him and that did 55,000 tickets in North America. So it was really successful. And in order for us to get to that, we knew that we needed to support, and it surely was the death of me. But we got him Imagine Dragons. He did that in arenas. We got him
Mm-hmm.
Avril Lavigne in arenas in Canada, and then I got him Bring Me the
Yeah.
Horizon here in the U.S. And the next time
Wow.
we went on the road, it was a clear return on investment. I mean, he didn't make much money on those
Mm,
tours. They weren't his.
sure.
He wasn't having insane sets because again, these are people that, you have a small window to gain a fan. And
Yeah.
you're trying to make someone who's a big fan of Bring Me the Horizon become a fan that
Yeah.
actually goes and follows you on Instagram, maybe buys merch, adds your songs to the playlist, their Spotify playlist. I mean, you have a small window to be able to do that. And the good thing about it is when you send a
Yeah.
client out there that you know is just gonna like slam dunk it, it's a good feeling because you can see it return for you pretty quickly.
Totally. That's a great case study and story. Let's talk about the financial aspect of it. When you said that when they went out with these huge acts and they didn't make much money on that, I mean, what is kind of why didn't they make much money? Is that just because like how does this work? And just for let's break it down for those that don't really know. Uh, what are we seeing in terms of like is there an industry standard for guarantees at various levels? Like what are you seeing for support acts at club level, theater level, ballroom level, arena level, all of that? Like how do the financials work typically, and travel and lodging and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, look, the short answer is that if you go on a tour like Imagine Dragons, who is just a massively
Yeah.
successful artist, and the agent is a very close
Yeah.
friend of mine. She's amazing. If you go out on a tour, I mean, Imagine Dragons doesn't need you to draw tickets for them. It's
Right.
you're in a situation there where if you're Imagine Dragons, you just want to take someone that's cool. You want to take someone that
Yeah.
you believe in, maybe you want to co-sign or whatever the scenario is.
Sure.
Now, if you have some leverage and that you are worth tickets, and you want to go on tour with someone who is worth more tickets, but maybe not a ton more than you, that's a different scenario. I mean, that's where you get into like really negotiating a good
Okay.
deal for the client. But look, on the big scale of if you're supporting these arena acts, I've had people support Fallout Boy, 21 Pilots, Blink 182, Imagine Dragons, Avril Lavigne. I've had acts on all of those tours, and those acts are career acts with really really impressive careers, who
Hmm.
they certainly don't mind someone drawing tickets, but they don't need them to, most
Right.
of them. So
Right.
it's kind of I guess that's a long way of saying it's a little bit more about like the leverage that you have in that specific situation. You can certainly make a lot of money supporting, but in these specific situations the tours were so big and established that we he wasn't going to make as much as if he just went out and headlined himself.
So I would love if you can you don't got to give me the artist's name and the dollar amount, but I think it would be super helpful if there was a ballpark or a range, just so people understand what to expect. Like let's talk an arena tour like you just mentioned of artists that don't need to sell tickets and the tour is going to sell out no matter what. Are we talking 200 a night, 2,000 a night to this opener, zero a night? Like I just don't have any. I just love a range, a ballpark, something.
Yeah, so the short answer is I will give you ballparks, but the short answer is something to factor here is, how much can that headliner charge on their ticket price, right? Because if
Okay,
the average ticket buyer for Imagine Dragons is probably a grown adult, right? Like it's probably
sure.
people late 20s plus. We even saw a lot of like parents with their kids, and they were both fans of the band.
Yeah.
So they can
Yep.
charge a good premium for their tickets. So something like that, they're a little bit more generous in that you might get, anywhere from 5 to 15 grand a night. If you're an act that's established and drawing some tickets. But I've had
Sure.
artists tour, do arena tours and make 500 a night, and those are the more like,
Okay.
oh, you're opening, you're the one of three, they took you as a favor because they like you, right? That's that kind
Sure.
of 500 to 1,500 or
Mm-hmm.
$2,000 a night slot. But those direct support the direct support tour situations
Yep.
where you're playing right before the headliner, in an arena, I think you can expect anywhere from 5 to 15 grand per show. And then,
Yeah.
if you have a ton of leverage and you're a really, really hot act, that's a completely different scenario. Like if you're an act that's worth,
Yeah.
5,000 tickets a night, but they just want to take you because they want to have an awesome show. I mean, they're going to pay what that's worth. That's where you get into
Sure.
30 to 50 to 75 grand per show. And that also happens.
Sure.
But that's a different scenario. That's not the textbook, like, oh, I'm going to open for so and so, and I'm, as far as I know, I'm
Right.
not worth tickets yet.
So let's talk about the artists that, let's say, are not worth tickets, like you referenced, maybe at a club level or a theater level or something like that. What are the scenarios and the deals that you're seeing these days?
I mean, it's all about how resourceful you are. Like I've seen a lot of people, I've seen artists never make it out of clubs and still have pretty successful
Yeah.
careers. There's not a lot of money in
Yeah.
clubs regardless. If you're headlining a club on a $20 ticket, if you're headlining a 500 cap, you're going to make anywhere from 3 grand to $7,500. It's all math, just depending on what your ticket
Yeah.
prices are. But and those are like, that's if you sell it out, right? Like a sellout offer is what we would call it. But look, if
Sure.
you do, if you're drawing a strong 500 tickets and you can do, a late 20s ticket price, and you add merchandise and you add VIP, I mean, you can start to really dig your heels in and make a little bit of money. But you got to be resourceful and not spend it all,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is something that a lot of
Yeah.
artists struggle early on. Is like, well, if I'm hiring a band early on, if the band isn't involved
Mm-hmm.
as like part of the project but is a hired band, that can be a little tough, because to the band it's like, well, why would I cut you a discount when I can go play for so and so? I'm not going to reap the rewards of playing for little and then you blowing up. That doesn't help me because I'm just a hired gun. Whereas it's a little different if it's a
Right.
band and every member is like invested in it long term. It's, you're obviously not going
Yeah.
to get to the end of the tour and demand money. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
every scenario is kind of different in that regard.
And in terms of support acts, how does it work differently for a club level support act who, let's say, is not worth tickets necessarily? Let's say the tour's going to sell out at the club level with the headliner. They need support. How does that work typically?
Um, so if it's not going to sell out at the club level, usually I would encourage paying a little bit more money and getting someone who, let's say you're in a 500 cap room on average and you
Yeah.
don't know if it's going to sell out or not. If you have that intuition that it
Yeah.
couldn't, I would say that's where you take a little bit less money as a headliner and invest that
Mm-hmm.
into taking someone that's worth tickets and creating a big show. Because
Yep.
at the end of the day, the headline numbers that go into Polestar and all these systems are based on the headliner, right? So like if you bring someone out
Yep.
and they draw 100 tickets a night, but you draw 400, that's a big W. That's a great win, whereas
Yep.
if
Yep.
you bring out someone who's worth 5 tickets and the tour does 300 tickets a night because it doesn't have a lot of buzz around it and the marketing's not there and multiple artists aren't marketing it,
Sure.
um, that could end up being counterproductive even if you make more money.
Yep. Yep. So you're from you grew up in the metal scene. I'm curious your perspective and your opinion on tour buy-ons. And for those of who are not familiar with tour buy-ons, it is a very controversial practice of headliners not paying their openers and support acts, but actually charging their openers and support acts for the opportunity to open the tour, and the opener, the money actually is flowing the other way, where the opener has to pay the headliner, uh varies the amount, but they pay the headliner to open the tour. Now I'm curious your opinion on that practice.
I mean, it's not a common practice. It's not something that I would necessarily suggest. Um,
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've seen artists buy onto tours and it completely return and be fantastic. And then I've seen artists buy onto tours and it was exactly what they expected, and that the headliner didn't care about them as the artist because they were just the buy on band. I think a
Right.
lot of that is rooted more in like why the headliner needs the buy on. If the
Mm,
headliner is just looking to make up for budget, says I don't give a fuck, pick somebody, just make them give you 25 grand and we're not paying them, they're going to treat you a little bit differently than someone sitting down and saying, hey, well, we need some help in some of these markets. Why don't we have this band buy on for 7,500 bucks and we'll take the 7,500 bucks and we'll juice it into marketing or whatever. So it's like,
yeah.
that's a little bit more advantageous for both people, and it's a little bit more artist friendly than just like writing a check. All that being said,
Yeah.
it if you write a check early on in your career, it might open up some more doors. I mean, yeah, do I think that that's ridiculous? Yeah, of course. But like, if you have that funding and you come in and you write a check for an artist that you're going to gain fans from, no matter what, more power to you. Just
Hmm.
don't complain if the headliner is not doesn't become your best
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point of how are they going to treat you. I think that's really important for every artist. Personally, I am extremely against the practice of tour buy-ons. Only because I've heard so many horror stories, and I just think it sets a bad precedent, and I just think that you know. You, artists should be paid to play, not have to pay to play. And I understand it's gonna it's gonna be a personal business decision for anyone, and like I get it when you say like you've seen some that return on that investment in merch sales, or they gained a ton of fans, and like totally that but that's what every artist feels like it's going to happen going into it. Now I've heard the horror stories of artists paying you know 10, 15, $20,000 for a tiny club level tour, and they are going on to five people in the room right when doors open. They play for 20 minutes, and they play to five people a night, and because the tour's not selling, the headliner can't sell tickets, but also no one's getting there early, and it's just like it wasn't worth it. Famously, this was about 10 years ago, the story broke. This Motley Crue, this is widely reported. Motley Crue charged their openers $1 million to open their entire arena tour, and they terrorized their openers the entire time. Not only did they make them go on before the doors open, start before the doors open, they had like the crew come out and spray the openers with super soakers full of urine. I'm not making this shit up. Like this is this
Holy
is like
fuck.
reported. But like you're exactly right. Like that's obviously the extreme, but like, how are they going to treat you is like a really good point. It's just like if you're the headliners are looking at you as like the buy-on band, then yeah, you're not going to get much respect. And I would really caution any artist against doing a tour buy-in just for that case alone. And it seems like it's a shortcut, and like God bless you if you got the funds, and good for you that you have a ton of money in the bank that you can buy on a tour. But I would just say that is a shortcut that doesn't tend to typically work out for the best, at least that I've seen in my experiences.
Yeah, man, it's totally. I've seen it be chopped up different ways and work. I've seen it be a disaster. you just kind of got to know, like, if
Yeah.
you're going to do it, it's a serious risk, and
Yeah.
it is not normal practice.
Yeah, and that's nice to hear from you saying it's not normal practice. And I've seen people get creative, and it's not hard and fast. Like I've seen, openers that are going to jump in the bus with the headliners, and the headliners essentially they're participating in some of the expenses up front. They're still getting paid a guarantee to open the show per show, but they're helping with some of the upfront expenses like a bus rental, like hotels, that kind of stuff. uh,
Right.
that to me seems okay, because it's like, okay, we're all in this together here. Let me open the books to you and let me just show you what's going to happen, but you get a bunk, you get this. And then in that instance, that seems far more okay to me than find your own transportation, your own lodging, and then pay us 10 grand. And then I was like, all right.
Right. Right. 100%, dude.
um anyway.
I've seen it be a
Yeah.
little, creative, and like I said, the digital marketing thing I think is pretty cool. If you're gonna have an artist buy on and you're gonna put
Yeah.
it into actually putting more people in the room, that seems pretty ethical. Um, it's just, dude,
Yeah.
every scenario is different, man.
Yeah. 100%. No, it's great. So speak to the artists out there right now who, maybe they are local heroes, and they can sell a few hundred tickets in their local market. But maybe they haven't toured yet. They want to get on a tour. They don't know how to get support tours, but they can bring it live. They've proven that. Maybe they have, some decent streaming numbers, but they really could not book a headlining tour right now. What do you recommend to those types of artists on how to get started touring?
I mean, well, first off, I would say if you're in that spot, congrats. It's a great spot to be in, and a lot of artists, they kick off their career as hometown heroes.
Yep.
And then they start to move out, branch out. 100 miles north, 100 miles wherever you
Hmm.
are geographically. What I would say is keep building that hometown base. When I was in a band,
Hmm.
my thing was is we would try to open up for all the real tours that were coming into town and make friends with the bands and just um, be really genuine with them and
Yep.
offer them a place to stay if necessary. I mean, um, we definitely did it. I
Brilliant.
think a good job when I was in a band of doing that and building that home base. And then, at some point, as your team grows, you might want to get an agent. You might need a manager, whatever that is. But if you're starting off in your hometown and you're seeing a lot of success, then replicate what you did in your hometown somewhere else. If you're from Birmingham,
Yeah.
I'll use a great example. If you're from Birmingham, Alabama, which is where I'm from, that's why I'm using that example. And
Sure.
you become a big artist in Birmingham, okay, we'll do all of those same things in Atlanta.
Hmm.
Find that promoter, open up for that show, pass out those flyers, the real grind and the real ground and pound. And if you can start
Yep.
to build it, you really keep building it, and at some point you'll if you do all the things, if you do everything right and you're putting out quality music, then you're going to create a demand, and
Hmm.
it'll end up on someone's radar, because agents and managers and labels and all the such, we scour what's new and cool, and we want to know who's drawing tickets in these towns.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say: is replicate what
Mhm.
you've done in your hometown, keep building it, and at some point you'll be able to hire someone that it's like their
Yeah.
expertise.
Yeah. When do you suppose that's great advice, and it's super practical, and I appreciate you laid it out that way, and that's great. Um, you know, I'm curious, how can artists go about finding an agent? Like I'm from, I got my music career started in Minneapolis, and theoretically a great music town, but it's felt like an island. So many times, all my friends' bands, they were drawing hundreds, if not, 1,000, 1,500 tickets, and selling tickets to their shows, headlining, First Ave main room, all this stuff. and they couldn't sell tickets outside, but they also couldn't get any industry recognition because it felt like an island. I ran into this too. Um, years ago. It's kind of like, all right, can sell 800 tickets, can't get a response to save my life, or I don't even know where to begin. And so, what do you? I guess what is the steps? What do you recommend? I guess for an artist, when are they ready for a booking agent? One, and if they think they're ready, how do they go about finding one? And let's use you directly. Let's say, someone is resonating, like, man, Daniel would be such a great booking agent for me. Like, when is the right time for them to approach you? How do they approach you? How do you want to be approached? And how does this work? Talk to an artist in Birmingham or wherever that they think they're ready for an agent. How do they get an agent?
So there's kind of multiple answers to this, because you might be in a spot as an artist where you know you are starting to see the return on investment in your hometown. You want to start to go other places.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you may not have any interest from like a record label or a manager yet, but maybe you're drawing tickets,
Yeah.
right? That's where I would say just
Yeah.
reach out to them. Yes, like a lot of them won't respond, of course, but like
Sure.
I usually say the number one mistake that people make when they reach out to agents is you just have to remember that agents are really, really busy, just like everyone else. And
Yeah.
if you send them
Yeah.
a book to read, over email, and they're in the gauntlet zone of like grinding and like a long day or on a conference call, you just have to think about it from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the best emails I've ever seen have been like, "Hey Daniel, I love your roster. We sound a lot like Grandson. Uh, we just sold out our hometown. Here's our upcoming demo that's not released yet." Like, I don't really need to know that
Yeah.
much more from the jump, And if I listen to it and I want to know more, I'll ask. So that's one thing I'd like. I think is keeping it precise with agents, and that goes for finding
Mm.
a label and a manager, etc. But I think it's definitely one of those things too, where like, again though, if you have a manager and you're starting to be worth tickets, usually the manager can, if they have relationships, the manager will help, hold your hand to get the right agent. Um, but
Sure.
yeah, I would just say like create demand for yourself, and then be
Yep.
strategic when you reach out. You just have to think about agents, managers, A&Rs, attorneys. They're all humans. So like if you send them
Yeah.
an email at 2 a.m. in the morning, they may not. It might get lost because they woke up and they had
Yeah.
people that make them money emailing them, right? So that's another
Yeah.
thing, is just like think about timing, think about what you're going to put in the email, be precise, create demand for yourself.
Yeah.
And again, agents, it's our job to have our ears to the ground. So like, we're going to be
Yeah.
scouring, we're going to be looking, and if you create demand for yourself, it'll end up on someone's radar.
Yeah. That's great advice. Yeah, and that's super practical advice. I want to just touch on briefly, because you're also the founder of Outlast Records. You're not only a booking agent, not only kind of the founder of this, the Continuous Foundation that we discussed at the top of the show. Talk to me about Outlast briefly, and kind of why you started it, what the mission is here, and what kind of artists you're looking for, if you are, on kind of how you're building this label.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, I think like
Yeah.
I the label kind of complements the agent stuff and vice versa. So it's enough
Yeah.
inside my circle that it's not that much extra work. It's really more about like if I find something I really like at the developmental level,
Hmm.
we usually talk
Yep.
about it for Outlast, because Outlast hasn't signed anything like previously established, really. It's been very ground floor. Like
Okay.
my agent roster, I would be much more prone to like wait until they're worth a couple hundred tickets before I'm signing it. the label is meant to
Sure.
be a developmental outlet. So it's stuff that I really, really believe in from a small level. Um,
Yep.
and yeah, it's we're under Sumerian Music Group, which is Sumerian Records, and
Mm-hmm.
so I have the freedom to sign stuff to that, and it's a lot of fun. It definitely is like a total grind. It's a lot of work in terms of
Cool.
like
Yep.
again, it's still inside my circle of what I do, but like I think where it really gets tough is managing expectations too with some of the artists that are I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not a magician. I would like to consider myself
Yep.
a good agent, um, and I think I've set our artists that
Mm-hmm.
are signed to the label up for success. But there's so many things that the artist has to do also to break. So,
Yep.
it's tough, but I'm having fun doing it, and it kind of scratches my creative itch of being in a band. I think for me to be able to kind of A&R the songs and the creative.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Well, Daniel, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you for being so candid with everything. I know everyone listening to this has really appreciated your transparency, all the practical advice that you gave. I know, people have really appreciated that. Um, I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Cool. Well, again, thank you for having me. Anyone that talks the mental health gospel is a friend of mine for sure. So thank you. Um, I think that having a career and being able to develop artists that you're really passionate about and get them to the arena level and the stadium level, that's my
Yep.
ultimate goal, right? Is to have a clientele of you know a certain amount of artists that can go play the Rose Bowl or play be big enough for baseball stadiums, and but also like maintaining happiness at the
Hmm.
same time, and maintaining work life balance in some capacity, at least to the best of our ability, and
Yep.
keeping my brain healthy. I think um, there's so many good aspects of the music industry to be in. The record industry is thriving, the touring industry is thriving, publishing is thriving. So yeah, I guess my answer is to be able to have a career and represent artists that I really really am passionate about and believe in on a big level, and also at the same time be a good person.
Daniel McCartney, thank you so much. This is great.
Thanks, buddy.
Today's episode was edited by Mikey Evans with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari Steak.